In this episode, I interview Benjamin Stromberg, founder and CEO of GolfRoots, a company dedicated to making golf more accessible. The conversation explores the importance of community, education, and partnerships in the golf industry, as well as the valuable lessons learned from both golf and his cadet experience at Texas A&M. Benjamin shares insights on the evolving golf industry, the challenges faced in building his business, and the initiatives being developed to enhance the golfing experience. Let's jump into the episode. Welcome to The Range, the podcast where we explore the intersection of passion and business in the world of golf. I'm your host, Ari Ratner, and each episode will dive into the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who are transforming the game we love into thriving businesses. Whether you're a golf enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about the business behind the sport, you're in the right place. So grab your clubs and join us on The Range as we tee off into the world of golf entrepreneurship. Welcome to today's episode of The Range. I am joined by Benjamin Stromberg, founder and CEO of GolfRoots. I came in touch with Benjamin and GolfRoots on LinkedIn and found it to be a really interesting business. I'll let Benjamin explain, but in its core, it's a equipment reseller, but I actually think it's much more than that. It gets golfers into the sport in a much more accessible way. So I'd love to let Benjamin tell the story, but welcome to the podcast.
All right, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So before we jump into the business, would love to give the audience a sense of your experience in the sport and when you first picked up the sticks, and then we could evolve the conversation into the business itself.
Yeah, so it starts back when I was around 4 years old. My grandpa and father started me out in the game, just kind of swinging a club out in the range, out at my grandpa's house in Santa Fe or out at the driving range here in Dallas. And I played until I was around 6. I never got an actual course, but I'd play, some par threes here and there and things like that. And, eventually I stopped cold turkey. I was all in on soccer. And that was really what I spent most of my time doing. And so, once I was nearing the end of my soccer career, club and school were coming to a close. I decided I wanted to get back into golf and see if I can make the high school golf team. And so when I was 17, I started practicing again. I would go to Top Golf and hit balls for hours there. That's the only driving range I knew of. And so that was really when I decided to get back into golf. I made the high school golf team as the worst player on JV. I barely made it in a 3-person playoff for the last spot and fell in love with the game. I'd come an hour early to practice, stay an hour late until I couldn't see anymore. And, I think a lot of people can probably relate with that experience of getting addicted to this game. And so when I went off to college, I kept playing and, over the summer after my freshman year, I worked at a fantastic country club in Santa Fe, New Mexico called Las Campanas. And that was really my first taste into the golf industry, learning about what really high caliber private clubs do, learning about the equipment, learning about how the industry works as a whole. And I came back to school and I went to Texas A&M and I was a member of the Corps of Cadets there, which is probably a whole long-winded explanation needed to explain that. But anyways, I founded the golf team for the Corps at A&M. So I used that as an opportunity to really see if I could do more than just have a club golf team. I got sponsorships and developed a social media presence and all these different things as a way to gain experience and learn more about the industry, which was really helpful as I eventually built out this company as well. So
Does the cadet team still exist?
It does. They do still exist. And they're actually quite solid too. There's a golf course on campus at Texas A&M. And as a member of the Corps, you have to live on campus all 4 years. And so you got very easy access to a place to practice, which is really convenient.
That's super cool. And I think it's interesting because not only did it allow you to stay close to the game, but as an entrepreneur, it was somewhat of a safe test in your entrepreneurial skills, right? Like you were a student, you're within the confines of A&M and the community within Aggie land. And so super interesting and smart to kind of test your entrepreneurial muscles while a student. Talk a little bit about, and actually before we jump into your entrepreneurial story, give the audience a sense of the GolfRoots business as a whole.
Yeah.
maybe kind of where it started, where it is today, and where you see it going tomorrow?
The whole business is designed to make the game more accessible. And so, the way we see it, there are three main barriers to entry, which is why our logo has three roots. And the first one is the cost of equipment is really high. And so beyond just the cost of equipment, it is very challenging for people to understand what options are out there and what to buy. And so we try to approach that by selling affordable pre-owned clubs and also full sets of clubs online, while also creating educational and informational content to demystify golf equipment and help people find what is right for them regardless of their budget. And the second one is that golf is very challenging. And so those videos help people understand the rules and the etiquette and things like that. But also eventually we want to help people find instructors and or instruction to help make it easier. And then finally, we think it's really challenging for people to find places to play where they're comfortable playing with people that they're comfortable playing with. And so that one is a little harder to approach aggressively because it's not very tangible. But we want to help people find great courses that have great atmosphere and where the pros are doing the right things to make people feel welcome. So that's another area of focus as we continue to grow, are those two other pillars. Right now, we're focused on that first route, which is the cost of equipment. And that's really where we put pretty much all of our attention into right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I of course knew of the equipment side of things. There's the education side, like you talked about. And then the third kind of area that brings to mind is like equitable playing, right?
Yes.
And I think so it's really interesting how you segmented your business into those three areas. Let's hone in on the beginning. And you talked briefly about starting the club team for the cadets at Texas A&M. When did you start to germinate the idea around GolfRoots?
So it started during COVID when I was at home. I started selling golf clubs that were in my parents' garage that I'd gotten from working at a country club, right? And started selling those, and they would reinvest the money I made to buying more clubs from Golf Galaxy's used rack. I'd sell those on Facebook Marketplace or Nextdoor or what have you. I started doing like a regripping service and things like that. I realized when I got back to school for my senior year was all these people wanted to start getting into golf post-COVID. All my friends, and they knew me as the golf guy. I was the founder of the golf team, and so they all wanted to play. And a lot of them were going to be commissioning that next year in Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy. And that was going to be a big thing. They wanted to be able to play maybe with senior officers or, their NCOs or what have you. And they knew nothing about clubs or the equipment. And so I started to build full sets for people. And I thought, this is really interesting. Like, people really want that help. They don't just want to go buy used clubs. They need someone to guide them into it. And at the same time, I thought back to my experience starting out, which, most of my clubs I got as hand-me-downs either from my grandpa or from people in my community. When I got started, I sent texts to everyone I knew who played golf and said, hey, do you have any old clubs sitting in your garage you don't want anymore? And what I realized then, and what finally clicked 4 years later, was that everyone has more clubs than they want. And they're all sitting in their garage and they don't want them. And so we started out by consigning people's old clubs because I didn't have the money to buy them. And so I'd consign them, I'd sell them, and I'd build full sets for people on Facebook Marketplace. And what really kickstarted it was my economics professor. One of my economics professors at A&M had a bunch of stuff he told me about, and that was upstairs in his attic. And I said, hey, at the end of the year, if you don't want those, I'll sell those for you. He said, sure. So I went over to his house on the way home from Thanksgiving. I got probably 12 bags of clubs. I packed up my whole car, came back after Thanksgiving to get the rest of them, and I started selling those. And that was the base of what eventually became GolfRoots. That's where we were able to build those first full sets from.
And were you selling it just as an individual? I mean, the business hadn't yet been incorporated or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'd come up in December of 2020, I came up with the name GolfRoots. I was thinking the Grassroots Golf Company. I was like, just combine that. GolfRoots. And so, but it was just through my Facebook account until, I was trying to sell to my friend, longtime soccer buddy, Jake Hoffman, who eventually became my co-founder. And he's like, we should build a website for this. And so we built a website to make it easier to sell the stuff on Facebook Marketplace, not to sell anything through the website. The website was literally just a way to show the photos of the clubs. And so that's when we eventually incorporated into GolfRoots and built the company from there.
That's awesome. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of dig in on that a little bit more and talk about how, because you make it seem so easy where, you start selling golf clubs through Facebook Marketplace, you build a website, shows off the clubs a bit better.
Yeah.
How are you driving or generating traffic or interest for these golfers that, it's kind of a two-way marketplace, right? You're buying golf clubs, used golf clubs, and then selling them to new consumers. So how are you on getting those golf clubs as you grew either regionally or nationally? Then also, how are you getting interested golfers to buy used golf clubs?
Yeah, so our demand and supply generation strategies have shifted significantly over the past 4 years, right? When we got started, the way we would acquire inventory was I called every single golf course in Texas and said, hey, do you guys have lost and found clubs you want to get rid of? And I drive around and I pick up their lost and found clubs or buy them from them or what have you. And that's where we got our clubs from pretty much. Or I'd put posts out on Facebook or next door and say, hey, looking to consign your old stuff and things like that. At the same time, the way that we would sell them is we'd create individual products on Facebook Marketplace and try to sell those. And then we'd create group listings and say, hey, we've got all these things. And then people would message and we'd send them photos from the website. And that was such a grind. Eventually, we created a Facebook sales team of people who would post these items to drive traffic to the website. So we had, at one point, I think we had like 12 people posting, a lot of college kids and things like that. That's how we generated all the demand, and we generated the supply through the courses. Eventually, the supply through the courses, just getting lost and found clubs, was not consistent enough to develop scale. And so we then shifted to buying stuff on eBay, which margin is terrible and it's rather inconsistent. And my parents got tired of seeing, dozens of boxes a day come in from eBay, and the recycling container got too full. And we were still using primarily Facebook Marketplace to sell those things. And then we slowly shifted into Facebook and ads, just Facebook ads at the time. Fast forward to where we are today, the way that we acquire our inventory is a lot more complex. We have a few different channels. The first and the primary one is we partner with courses, mainly private courses around the country, running these things that we call trade-in days, where our team flies out or drives out, members bring in their old clubs they don't want anymore. They trade them in exchange for pro shop credit at their club. Then we pay the club for that credit and ship all those back here to our headquarters in Dallas. So we work with 300 plus private clubs around the country, some really big names, Medina, Southern Hills, Olympia Fields, Colonial, all sorts of clubs like that.
Can you dig in and talk a little bit about that process and how you got it started? And was it a regional approach around the Dallas area and then morphed into more of a national approach? How did you even start to reach out to these clubs?
So we realized that there needed to be, in order to make this business successful, and I think that a lot of companies miss this, what we really wanted to do was to build a company that was benefiting courses while also benefiting consumers, instead of what we've seen traditionally in the golf industry over the past 10 years, which are companies that either help courses and pros to the detriment of consumers or help consumers to the detriment of pros and courses. We wanted to create something that was symbiotic, that would work for both of them. And so, what we started to do is we called courses up and we said, this time it was, can we buy your lost and found clubs? Can we buy your excess inventory? Can we do trade-ins for your members? And there was one club, the old club that I worked at in Santa Fe. I've been trying to get them to work with me for 2 years. This was in January of a year and a half. This was in January of 2022.
And you had our other clubs already working with you.
We had 2 clubs at this point.
Okay.
And actually, no, we just had one. And it was one of my old coworkers, Mike Stacy, who was then at the time in Massachusetts. He had sent us a bunch of stuff that they had in their bag room. And so I finally went to this course, Lost Components. I said, hey, we want to run the trade-ins for your members. They finally said, okay, yeah, we're open to it. But do you guys do something where you could come out and do these trade-ins on the same day as a demo day? So, oh yeah, of course, we do that all the time. I had no idea what that would look like. But I started thinking about it after that meeting with Brad, who's one of my mentors. And I started thinking about it. And that's when I realized that there was really something there. I was still working my full-time job at the time. And so I then drove down to San Antonio. I set up 6 events in San Antonio for February. And then 3 weeks later, I quit my job because I had a feeling that it was going to work. So I quit my job 2 days before our first trade-in day. And since then, we've done hundreds of them, which is pretty cool. But we started out regionally focusing on Texas and then expanded from there. It's funny, we only had 1 course in Dallas for a year. It was exceptionally hard to get courses in our hometown to work with us.
Why do you think that was?
I genuinely do not know. One theory I have which is definitely valid, is a lot of the courses in Dallas are part of Invited, which is formerly Club Corp, which we now work with all of their courses around the country, which is fantastic. But at the time, it was hard to break into that as a smaller company.
Yeah.
But, I remember our first events were in San Antonio, and then randomly Salt Lake City, Boston, Jackson Hole, it was very much all over the place. And now we have presence pretty much in every state. And yeah, it's really expanded a lot.
So as you think about, or as you look back at that experience in terms of, the one-to-one relationships with the clubs, talk about what the team looked like back then when you were just kind of building the business to what it looks like now. And as a CEO, founder, entrepreneur, how your mindset has shifted or evolved as the business has grown.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a big question and a great one too. I think that our team has changed culturally, obviously in size as well. But, when we were first running our first trade-in days, I was the only full-time employee at the company. My co-founder Jake was still working his corporate job in DC, and we were still in my parents' garage at the time. And we had a few people who worked part-time. They'd come to the garage. Eventually we moved out into the chiropractor's office. We started to get a few more full-time people. And, now we have, I guess, 16 full-time staff members. And, I think that we really try to approach this business from the perspective we want to empower our team to make really great decisions and try new things and be creative. I think that the golf industry feels very stuffy and people are not willing to try new things. And I think it's the wrong approach, obviously. And it's easy to say that and it's harder to implement, I think. But we've really made a strong effort to create a positive culture here. And at one point, we didn't really have a great one, And it took a lot of time to learn that and to kind of reevaluate and, make changes and to allow people to feel empowered to be, as we call it, the CEO of their own position.
I love that. And I think also, as a young business, even though you've accomplished so much, I think the culture will probably continue to evolve, right? And as you add an educational element to the business and that grows as you think about how to get people to play different courses, and that will help grow the business and drive the culture forward. So I mean, it's phenomenal what you've built so far. I want to touch on similarities between golf and entrepreneurship, but I think you have a unique experience on top of that, and that's your cadet experience while at Texas A&M. So, even though this is a golf and entrepreneurship podcast, would love to kind of hear your perspective on what you learned as a cadet at Texas A&M that you've been able to bring to your entrepreneurial experience.
That's a great question. It was such a valuable experience, for a number of reasons. I think one of the big ones was getting real leadership experience early on, in college, and learning about different leadership styles and testing things out. For me personally, I think I learned exactly how I didn't want to lead. And not from other people, from myself. I think that I was very, very hands-on, and so much so where I wouldn't allow people beneath me to lead their people effectively. And that was a really valuable lesson, which I don't even think I really learned until the past 2 years. I think that the core taught me so many great things about hard work. And I think one of the big ones was getting up and working out in the morning, right? It seems like a small thing, but getting stuff done. You can't make an excuse later in the day. That's such a big one. And prioritizing my health has been really critical, I think, especially when I was working my full-time job as well. I'd get up at like 5:15, work out, and still have time to work before I started my other job. I think that it's like they call it a leadership lab, and I think it truly was that, where you have to try out different styles of leadership. And I think that was really interesting. I think it was an invaluable experience and definitely shaped me.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Transitioning a bit to golf and entrepreneurship, since you played golf at a very young age, then you got back into it around high school. What do you think the sport of golf has taught you about entrepreneurship, or what lessons did you learn while playing golf that you've been able to bring to your business experience?
Yeah, that is such a good question. I think for me, it is that in golf and in entrepreneurship, there are factors that you cannot control. The wind, the speed of the greens, competitors, there are a whole number of things you cannot control. But what you can control is the amount of work that you put in to honing your craft. And I think that is such a great metaphor for what entrepreneurship is like. You don't need to be telling people about all the work you're doing behind the scenes to get better at putting or to fix your slice, but they're going to see it when it's fixed, and that no one else is going to fix, that duck hook. You have to go fix it yourself, right? And you can have help. You can have an instructor, a mentor, things like that. But ultimately, it falls on you. And that is really crucial. For me, soccer and golf and sports in general, I think really shaped who I was. That I was always someone who was going to go and work when no one else was watching. The same thing with my business partner. He and I would go, when we were soccer buddies growing up, he and I would go train on the weekends every Saturday and Sunday. I was a goalie and he was a striker. And so he'd shoot on me and stuff like that. And I think that taught a lot of valuable lessons about putting in that work and controlling the controllables. And
I love it. It's kind of simple advice, right? But it's so important. And oftentimes, people don't think about the work that you have to put in, both as a golfer or as an entrepreneur. So I think you're spot on. You mentioned earlier about one of your mentors.
All right, sorry. There's one other thing I'd mention about it too, is that with entrepreneurship as well as golf, you will hit bad shots, you will make bad decisions, and really what makes either a good business or a good golfer is your ability to understand what you did wrong, learn from it, move on, and recover. I think that is really, those two things fit so well together.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that you mentioned that, because it is great advice and something that both golfers and entrepreneurs need to reconcile. Is things won't always go the way you want them to. And so it's being able to learn, right? And then continue on and not focus on the past.
Right.
I think that's great advice. You had mentioned earlier about a mentor of yours.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about, as an entrepreneur, as a young entrepreneur growing up, and the importance of having mentors and how that has helped shape the success of the business so far.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, right? I've had a number of mentors in different areas, people who have taught me about the golf industry or entrepreneurship or leadership, a ton of different things. I'm a very curious person. I like to ask a lot of questions, and I think that that's a very good skill to have as an entrepreneur. That one of the most dangerous things is thinking that you know everything. And so I'm so lucky to have had and to still have amazing mentors around me who support me, who question my ideas, and who allow me to bounce things off of and learn from. That is so vital. And as I continue to grow, and I would like to pay that forward and be a resource to other people too. I think it's the best way to learn is to teach as well. And so I think it's important for people to remember that.
Well, hopefully you view joining the range as at least a small part of you giving back. But we appreciate hearing your story. Part of having mentors is kind of the broader sense of community around golf. And, golf can be a very singular experience when you're out on the course, either with people you know or with people you don't, but you're playing against yourself for the most part. But talk about just the community of golf, both as a sport, but also as a business, and how that has shaped your experience within entrepreneurship.
Yeah, golf is so special. Like I said, I grew up playing when I was a kid. I'd play with my grandpa, and I think that one of the really cool things is the ability of golf to bridge the gap between generations and for people to be able to have a shared experience. It's so special because it doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from or your background, your race, ethnicity, religion. Golf is something you can all share together. Unfortunately, I think that the golf industry as a whole misses this. And I think for years, it's been so exclusive, whether purposefully or accidentally, and I think purposefully, if you ask me, that we're keeping people out and keeping new ideas out, and that stifles innovation and ultimately hurts us, the consumers. And so, for me, I think the power of golf comes in the diversity of experience, thoughts and ideas, skill level, all these different things. That's what makes this golf community special. And that's why we exist is we should be able to bring everyone into this game.
Yeah. I love the accessibility aspect of GolfRoots. I think it's really important. And at first glance, again, when I introduced you, one could look at the business and think of it as an equipment reseller, but the reality is you are trying to do so much more, and that's introduce the game to more people.
We tell our team that, we are not a golf equipment company. We're a golf company that happens to sell equipment. That's really what we see ourselves as. We're always striving to find new ways to actually fulfill that mission of making the game more accessible. And we're not golf club peddlers, right? Yeah. We sell golf clubs, sure. Yeah. But there's a whole lot more that we can do.
Absolutely. And I think you're doing it. And just hearing your story and the conviction behind why you started GolfRoots and getting people into the sport more easily, I think it is coming through, at least for me. So, appreciate hearing it directly. The podcast won't release for a few weeks after our conversation. And I know you just got back from the PGA show, but as we talk about kind of the evolution of the sport, even you had mentioned in high school, your driving range was Topgolf, which didn't exist when I was in high school, right? So the game is evolving, and give the audience a sense of your experience at this past PGA show and some of the things that got you excited about being part of the sport from a business perspective.
Yeah, I love seeing these new golf experiences pop up, whether they're these golf simulator places or driving ranges that make it more about the being together with other people around golf. I think that stuff's really exciting. I think that I'm very optimistic about where the golf industry is heading. And places like Topgolf really help with that. Slightly concerned, though, that we may miss the momentum, or we may lose the momentum that we've gained from COVID if we don't make serious change and make the game more accessible quickly. That people are interested right now, and there are a lot of things that turn them away from the game, whether it's the stigma behind the game itself or the inaccessibility of equipment or courses or things like that. But I think those are big ones. I'm also excited to see new companies that are golf adjacent move into golf as well, and seeing the value of this consumer base too, which it's fun to see that at the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to the GolfRoots business, you mentioned earlier on that obviously right now it's centered around the equipment side of things, but I'd love to talk a little bit more about the educational side of things and where you see that coming into play and how that could be the second kind of big pillar of your business in the near future.
So when we started the business, one thing we did is we had GolfRoots teaching partners, and it has since gone away just because it was not the easiest thing to do. But it started out as, if you get a full set or an iron set, you get a 15-minute lesson for free from any of these coaches, which I loved. I think it was a great way to generate business for pros, as well as get people a taste of what instruction is like. Right now, we're working with certain companies, for example, Mustard Golf, to get people access to online instruction. This one specifically is an AI-based app that analyzes your swing and then connects you with videos and pros to help you through it. What we eventually want to do is move towards helping people solve their swing problems while also helping people find great coaches and bringing them business too. The golf industry runs on pros. And so if we can help them and we can help, ultimately, if people play better golf, they're going to spend more money in golf, right? Like, why wouldn't we make it easier?
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. As you guys think of your business from start to where it is today, if you don't mind giving the audience a few of the challenges that you've had to overcome as because you make it sound like it's so simple, and I know it's not. And I know, you're chuckling because the hard work that you and the team puts in on a daily basis. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that GolfRoots has had to overcome to be where it is today.
I think some of the biggest challenges throughout our time already have been on the supply generation side. So shifting from getting the clubs for free from lost and founds at courses to eBay to buying off Facebook Marketplace, all these different things, generating the supply to meet the increasing demand has always been a challenge. That's been the biggest thing, and finding new ways to do it. Right now we've been developing a really neat functional online trade-in system for consumers to use, as well as so we can get stuff in addition to our trade-in events. But that's really been one of the big parts is dealing with that, as well as then dealing with the seasonality of golf, right? January and February are not big buying months, right? And same goes for October and early November. But really what we want to do is find ways to push that supply side as well as the demand at the same time. I mean, that's business, I guess, but that's been one of our biggest challenges. I also mentioned earlier the cultural piece too. I'd say 2 years ago, Jake and I took a step back and realized that we had a lot of the wrong people in the right places in the company. And that all fell on me, right? That was not to blame anyone else for that, but really what we were trying to do is find anyone who could work for us and for whatever we could pay at the time. And so we, like a lot of companies, said, we'll deal with culture when it becomes a problem, right? And I remember hearing a podcast from Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, back in the day, saying, don't let culture become an issue later. You need to solve it immediately. And I remember thinking, how could you not just fix it later? It happened to me. And we had a petty culture where people would, hold things back from one another and talk about each other behind their backs. And, I was a terrible micromanager. I'm working on it still. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but there were a lot of things wrong with our culture. And we took a step back. We wrote an employee handbook. I read some books, tried to learn from mainly modern tech companies on what they do to create innovation from within. And we reevaluated, we rehired, we let some people go, and we restarted. And that was really, really hard. And that was one of the best decisions we ever made, I think.
It's interesting because I think it shows a really high level of maturity for such a young entrepreneur, is to be able to look in the mirror and see where you may have done some things wrong to start, but to fix it at the time, to not belabor those problems continuing to exist. So I think you should take pride and feel good about being able to see that and making the necessary changes. And I assume a lot of that has to do with the people that you surround yourself with.
Amazing people here, and we're so lucky that we have an amazing team. They're fantastic.
That's awesome. As we kind of near the end of the conversation, would love to hear any pieces of advice that you'd want to share with other golf entrepreneurs or prospects that are looking into getting into the golf business. What are some things that you'd tell them as they're starting out their journey?
I think one of the big ones is find good mentors who are willing to answer your questions, spend time with you, let you struggle a bit, but also put you on the right track when they need to. That's really, really vital. And then be very, very open to criticism and learning and ask a ton of questions.
Yeah. That's awesome. Going back before we end, the team you said, I think, is at 16 or 17 full time.
I think that's right. I lose track, to be
honest. Yeah, that's fair.
I can't remember for some reason.
That's fair. Let's talk about the future of GolfRoots.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going? And obviously you mentioned the 3 pillars. Talk about what you see over the next few years as you look to grow the business.
We want to be one of, if not the biggest players in this space. I think that, not to name names or anything, but I think some of the large companies in this space have it all wrong. They are just golf club peddlers. That's it. They don't care at all about the customer experience or creating a transformational experience. Golf is transformational, right? Like, I'm sure you can relate with this. It's changed my life. And the fact that they're missing that is ridiculous. They price gouge consumers. They get away with posting, stock photos of used clubs. It's just ridiculous. I think that we want to change this industry. We want to allow golf to ride the wave post-COVID and keep growing. And as we see it, the companies that exist that we compete with are not fit to do that at all. And so we're not going to stop until we are the name in this space, and that we make this game more accessible to everyone. And there are so many different ways that we can do that outside of just the equipment. And we're just so excited to continue to grow and find new ways to do it.
I love it, dude. I love the passion. I love like I said, I love the conviction in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Before I let you run, would love to just ask a handful of rapid fire questions to give the audience a sense of you as a person. And then, of course, we'll tell the audience where they could find more about GolfRoots, but just a few questions to get to know Benjamin Stromberg a bit more.
I'm ready.
All right. Awesome. What is the one piece of gear you can't live without on the course?
My Scotty Cameron Studio Design 2.5 Black Pearl. I got it from my economics professor back in college. So
That's awesome.
Put that in the bag.
Do you still keep in touch with your econ professor?
I send him an email update every year. And it's pretty cool. Looking back at the texts there in the email chain and seeing where we came from.
That's super cool. What's the favorite course you've ever played?
Shooting Star in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
I imagine it's beautiful.
Incredible. Unbelievable.
How'd you shoot?
I shot a 74.
Bad.
Pretty pleased with that after a 2-hour rain delay too.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Not bad at all. What's your proudest moment as a golf entrepreneur?
I think that our holiday party this year, just seeing everyone together, it really hit home what we've done so far. Yeah. And from an internal perspective, that's my most proud moment. And then I'd also say seeing people, the impact that we've had on the customer side, people who have just the root sets, our basic starter set, who've gotten into the game because of us. I mean, that makes me so proud. And it's really cool.
That's awesome. Go-to snack and drink during a round.
Okay. My go-to drink, I know this is boring, but water.
Okay. Got to keep hydrated.
Yes. My go-to snack. Have you ever had like a frozen Uncrustable? That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. My kids eat that almost every day.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Last question. If you could collaborate with any brand in the world, who would it be?
Gosh, I really like Viore.
Okay. Yeah.
I really like Viore.
A little Viore merch collab for GolfRoots.
Yeah, that's what we need.
Awesome. Well, Benjamin, I really appreciate the conversation. I love hearing more about the GolfRoots business. I think what you've built so far is a really strong business, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the future. If you don't mind, give the audience, where they could find you across social and how they get in touch with you.
So our website is golfroots.com. Instagram is golf.roots. TikTok and Facebook, YouTube are at GolfRoots. And if you guys ever have questions about clubs or anything, feel free to message our team on our website or on social media too. So, and if people ever have ideas or things they'd like to see in our content, we'd be happy to listen to those and include them as well.
Awesome. Well, Benjamin, I appreciate the time and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.